Story 1. For context, I've been working at a resort restaurant for almost 4 years that also operates as a private club for members. As you'd probably expect, most if not all of our members are very rich people who usually either own or manage some major successful business or inherited money from a family member. Despite their privilege, however, it hasn't stopped these people from being kind and respectful towards the staff and guests. They're honestly really sweet people most of the time and only ever act entitled when they feel they haven't been given the basic treatment expected for any guest at our hotel. Even the owner himself, who visits every so often, doesn't ask for anything outrageous if he knows he can't get it from us. That doesn't mean entitled types aren't uncommon, but even still, their behavior doesn't last long. They can demand a manager all they want, but a manager can still say no and get away with it. This is because no matter how much they scream or cry, throw their money or titles around, or act like a jerk, our resort still puts the happiness of their staff over money. As the HR rep at my recent annual training said, no matter how important our members are or how much money they spend, that doesn't give them the right to treat others badly or act like they're better than those around them. We have no tolerance for that. So pull up a chair and get your popcorn, because I'm about to tell you the 3-part story about how a family of 3, a daughter, a mother, and a father, had their memberships completely revoked and their faces plastered on "Do Not Serve" signs because they decided to throw a fit and threaten staff, managers, and eventually even one of the big bosses himself. Let's begin. Side note: this story took place in a different restaurant, a sports bar, and was told to me by a bartender who had connections there. I know the important details and not any fluff, so keep that in mind. Chapter 1. The daughter gets fired. This story started when a new girl, Heather, was hired to work as a waitress at a sports bar. Heather had known about the job through her parents, Mrs. Karen and Mr. Kevin, who were both members at our resort. Hiring children of members actually isn't uncommon, since whenever the parents needed their child to get a job, they'd automatically consider the resort due to their connections. However, you don't get any extra perks for being both a member and employee here. One night, when Heather was working, the bar got hit really hard, and it was an all-hands-on-deck kind of situation. So imagine the surprise when a frantic waitress ran across a table where Mrs. Karen, Mr. Kevin, and Heather were all sitting. Heather was happily laughing with her parents, eating food, drinking a cocktail, a massive no-no BTW for a multitude of reasons, and generally just slacking off. The employee walks up and says to Heather, "Hey, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working. I need your help here." Heather brushes the employee off and says, "I can't. I'm spending time with my parents right now." The employee responds, "You can't do this. We're in the middle of a shift. Please help me." Heather repeats her refusal. "Leave me alone. I'll work when my parents are gone." Her parents didn't say much as far as I can remember. So the employee, red-faced, did what any other person would do in this situation and told one of the managers, who was furious. When the manager approached the table, she was even angrier. Maybe it was the cocktail her employee was holding or the fact that Heather had misbehaved before, but the manager fired Heather that night and sent her home. I can't remember whether the parents were there or not at that moment, but I recall being told that once or twice they called to complain how it was unfair their child was fired because insert reason here. However, it wouldn't be the last time they intervened. Chapter 2. Mrs. Karen gets dragged out of the bar by security. About a week had passed since Heather was fired, and it's just a normal day for the sports bar. As typical, the employees just started arriving for work and started preparing the bar and restaurant area for the guests who'd be arriving in an hour. Among those employees was the manager for that day, who I'll call Alice. Alice was actually one of the main managers of the sports bar and was very good at her job. I'd worked with her once before, and she's one of the kindest and most loving ladies you'd ever have the pleasure of working with. She was helping the employees with their duties when the doors to the bar opened unexpectedly. A guest coming into the bar before opening wasn't uncommon, but this wasn't any normal person. It was a very, very angry Mrs. Karen, who immediately upon entering the bar started screaming at the staff. My daughter has COVID, and now she's sick. I bet she got it from one of you, didn't she? I can't believe you monsters would do that to her. You got her fired, and then you get her sick? Don't you know who I am? For the record, this happened in mid to late 2020, when the virus was still a big issue. Masks were mandatory for businesses, and vaccines weren't even available to the public yet. The staff immediately stopped what they were doing and started watching. Keep in mind, this sports bar was actually one big massive room, so everyone there could see and hear everything. Alice tried to approach Mrs. Karen and asked her to calm down and to leave because they weren't open yet. However, Mrs. Karen kept screaming and making a major scene out of everything. Alice shifted to a more strict tone, insisting Mrs. Karen leave or she'd get security involved. That's when Mrs. Karen noticed something behind Alice. One of the employees had gotten their phone out and started recording everything that was happening. I mean, obviously someone would do that in this day and age, right? Mrs. Karen was furious and turned her anger onto the employee. She ran up to them and smacked their phone so hard, it flew out of their hands, and then proceeded to scream at them even louder than before. Ooh, that would be assault, ma'am. Alice immediately called security, who came to the bar almost immediately. Mrs. Karen had to be physically dragged out of the building by two very large security guards as she screamed every possible thing an entitled person could say. As you'd expect from a situation like this, an incident report had to be filed, and since Mrs. Karen was a member of the resort, her and Mr. Kevin's membership was temporarily suspended pending investigation. Security even had to print posters with Mrs. Karen's face on it saying to keep watch and under no circumstances serve her or even her husband until further notice. And then it got worse. Chapter 3. Mr. Kevin threatens the general manager and loses his membership permanently. The time frame between Mrs. Karen's freakout and this wasn't ever told to me, but I remember it happened so soon after that the original posters with Mrs. Karen on them hadn't even been taken down yet. Needless to say, Mr. Kevin, who was the primary holder of the family's membership, was furious about what happened. But what do you think he'd do? Did he try to reach out calmly and apologize? Did he wait a little for the dust to settle before repairing things? Lol, did you even read the chapter's title? Most employees actually know where most of the major managers' offices are and know how to find them. While this was never taught to me when I was first trained, I believe it's probably just a cautionary thing. One of the major managers, our resort's general director, had his office located in the main building, and as you'd guess, has power over various departments. As you'd expect, his name is everywhere, including major emails the members would get about newsletters and things like that. Everyone knew this man, knew his face, knew his position, and knew what he did. On that fateful day, Mr. Kevin arrives at the resort and immediately started asking employees where he could find the GD. Some naive fool who probably had no idea of anything going on gave him the answer and told him where he could find the GD. Honestly, no idea why this employee gave the answer so willingly, and maybe I'll never know, but Mr. Kevin charged to the office. Mr. GD was quietly sitting at his desk in his office when Mr. Kevin threw open the doors and without hesitating, unloaded all of his fury upon the man. Mr. GD, a man who I'd never seen angry or raise his voice, immediately told Mr. Kevin that he shouldn't be yelling at him and that he will get security involved. But, say it with me, Mr. Kevin didn't stop. He, instead, kept insisting his membership be reinstated, that his wife be let back onto the resort, that this was all ridiculous, and that he spends thousands on us, and that we should apologize. After all, it wasn't his fault. But Mr. GD wasn't amused. Of course, he was aware of the situation with Mr. Kevin's family and membership status, but his hands were tied, and what Mr. Kevin was doing at that moment wasn't exactly going to help him. I mean, would you help a man who just barged into your office unannounced and started screaming at you almost immediately? Just like his wife, security was called and Mr. Kevin was dragged out of the office and thrown off property. I even think police got involved, but I can't remember for sure. What I do remember is this being the final straw for Mr. Kevin and his family and courtesy of Mr. GD. Mr. Kevin's entire family not only had their membership terminated, but were even banned from the property. Well, what would you expect to happen? Play with fire. Prepared to get burned, right? Chapter 4, Epilogue. I remember first learning about this story when I saw the posters for myself. Imagine a piece of paper with a family picture of Mr. Kevin and Mrs. Karen hung on the wall of security's office with these fine words written. Mr. Kevin and Mrs. Karen's membership has been terminated due to their poor treatment of staff and guests on our property. If you see these two anywhere on property or at sports bar, do not serve them and immediately call security. Thank you. The poster stayed on that wall for almost 2 months. I'd often talk to some of the officers at security. I would visit them a lot before I started work for the day during the summer, and they never saw or heard from them again. As my co-worker finished the story, she laughed loudly and said, "Those nutcases had it coming. Good riddance." As far as I know, none of them were ever heard from again. I agree. Don't be an entitled jerk. The end. Story 2. I've been living in my house for over 10 years now. My next-door neighbors were a nice old couple, and I have had a wonderful relationship with them over the years. Nearly a year ago, my good neighbor suffered from a heart attack, and sadly he couldn't make it. And a few weeks after, his wife decided that it was too much for her to stay in the same house without her beloved husband and decided to move to a different city to be near her daughter, who insisted that she come live with her after her father passed. But the thoughtful lady wanted to live in a separate place to not crowd her daughter's house and be a burden on her. Anyways, they put their house up for sale, and eventually a couple of entitled idiots ended up buying it. They were in their early 50s, and the word rude doesn't even begin to describe how they always treated every neighbor around them from the get-go. Demanded them to do some major changes to their own houses because it's looking bad to them whenever they look at it. Clearly the wife, Karen, was on the HOA board back in the community they were living in. So yeah, you could get where the demanding part is coming from. She was used to this, and it seems that she got her way most of the time. One day, she came to my doorstep, rang my doorbell, and demanded that I invite her in so she could discuss a serious matter with me. I complied with her nonsense, not because I have to, but just because that's how I was raised. It was all about good manners to me. I let her in, sit her down, and get her some fresh juice. She makes a snarky comment about the juice, but I let it slide. At the end of the day, she's a guest, and she's in my house, so I tolerated her nonsense a bit more than usual. Then she starts talking about how her son is planning on getting married 6 months from now, and how he's been looking lately for a house to live in after he ties the knot. More like they are looking for a house for him since he can't afford crap himself. They want to buy him a house. Up until this point, I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do with all of this pointless information to someone like me. I mean, yeah, congratulations and all, but okay. Why are you telling me this? Do you want me to lend you some money, or what exactly do you want from me? I had no idea. That is until she started spouting the most insane, entitled demands anyone has ever asked of me. I want to buy your house for my son. I didn't realize it at first. It went right over my head. I was like, okay, what house? As far as I know, I don't own any houses other than this one I'm living in. Sue, you must have been mistaken about something. Whatever house you're interested in buying, it's not really mine. At the time, I didn't even think that she would dare ask me or anyone else something like what you're all thinking right now. She then asks me, "Isn't this your house? You're the owner, right? You're not renting it." Well, yeah, this house is mine. But what does that have anything to do with what you're asking me about? Everything. It has everything to do with what I'm talking about. Because the house I want you to sell me is this house. I didn't believe what I just heard for a second. I had to ask her a couple more times just to make sure she meant this house I've been living in for 10 years now. When it dawned on me, I couldn't help but ask her, "Okay, so after I sell it to you, where am I supposed to go?" And her answer was, "That isn't really my problem, is it? I mean, you could go wherever you want to go. I don't know, try another state or something. That's your choice. I don't want to force anything on you." I just couldn't help it. I jumped out of my seat instinctively and screamed, "Get out!" She seemed genuinely confused, as if she didn't know what the hell she just said. She asked me, "What? What's the meaning of this?" I kept shouting, "Get out of my house right now! Are you freaking mad?" She blurted some nonsense in return on her way out, but eventually went back to her house after she stopped for a bit right in front of mine and started calling me names. And she didn't move until I threatened to call the cops and tell them that she was harassing me. After this encounter, she started making my life a living hell. She tried annoying the hell out of me in hopes that she could drive me away from my own home. Even had her brat send thugs to my doorstep and office to intimidate me into selling my house to them. One day, I returned to my house and found my teenage kids freaking out and my daughter shaking and crying in the front yard. And when I asked them what's wrong, they said, "There's a snake in the house." What? A snake? In my house? Since when do we get snakes in this area? It's not even possible seeing things like that where I live. I called 911 and animal control, and they arrived within 15 minutes after asking us to stay outside. They went in and started searching for it, and after 35 minutes they managed to catch the snake, but stayed for another 30 minutes to excessively search for more snakes since we had no idea how many of them were there. While all of that happened, most of the nearby neighbors stood by us outside of our house to check what's going on. And some even tried to calm down my kids, and they were very supportive. All except our entitled neighbors, they never got out of their house. Clearly a disaster was happening to their next-door neighbor, but none of them bothered to check what was going on. I knew they were inside because I noticed them looking from behind the window curtains in their house, while being weirdly calm about the whole situation. And when I caught myself thinking that they might be responsible for that snake showing up in my house, I felt guilty because I shouldn't be thinking horribly of someone just because I had a bad encounter with them before. I know what you're thinking, but believe me, I myself don't know how I got that far in life with this naive mindset of mine either. But I promise, it's not like that anymore. At least not after what happened with these jerks. It took us all some time to start living comfortably in our house after this one incident. We were frightened for weeks, paranoid, and even imagining that the shadows in our peripheral vision were crawling on the floor or onto our beds. It was a traumatic experience to some degree, but we're good now. A couple of weeks go by and I wake up at night to some extremely loud screaming coming from around my house. I jumped out of my bed, checked on my kids, then called the cops even before knowing what's going on, and told them that I'm hearing horrific screaming coming from around my house, gave them the address and bolted out to the door. At first, I didn't see anything up front, but when I followed the sound, it took me to the back of my house as I suspected, and there she was. Karen is laying flat on her back screeching like a banshee, and on top of her were two snakes crawling all over her body. I was overwhelmed by what I was seeing and had too many questions flying across my head at once, but her screaming brought my attention back to her and forced me to focus on getting her out of this situation. I tried to find a long stick or something to get those snakes off of her. I kept trying to push them away and even yelled at her to get up and get away from them, but she kept crying that she has been bitten and that she's paralyzed and can't move. It didn't take long for the cops to show up. They tried to help her themselves until the imps and animal control arrived. And eventually, the whole situation was contained. Snakes were captured and she was taken to the hospital, all while screaming about how she's going to get me arrested and evicted from my own house for putting her life in danger by raising snakes all around my house. What she didn't know at the time is that after the first incident with a snake being found in my house, I couldn't really shake the feeling that this was not a coincidence or just bad luck. Just some random snake decided to wander into some populated neighborhood away from any kind of forest nearby and wanted to grab a cup of coffee in this one house of ours. Nah, I didn't know how to buy that. I mean, yeah, I was a bit naive, but I don't know, I just couldn't shake off that feeling. So I went and installed a couple of cameras around the house. I thought that this solution was satisfying for me at the moment. I'm not directly accusing anyone of bringing a snake to my doorstep, but at the same time, I'm taking my precautions and not fully ignoring my doubts and the alarms going off in my head. But classic me completely forgot about my cameras. I didn't check the tapes until my son brought it to my attention the next day that, hey, we have cameras. We could check what went down last night using them, right? Oh wow, cameras, yeah, let's do that. And we were shocked from what we saw on that tape. Karen was sneaking into our backyard with a dirty bag in her hand. She was carrying it carefully, and she was very keen on not getting it near her. She then came near my basement's wooden back door that was not in its best shape BTW and started to carefully open the bag bit by bit, as if she's trying to pour what's in the bag into a small hole I had on one of the wooden doors. And of course, as you may think by now, she brought the 2 snakes in this bag she was carrying, and she was clearly trying to sneak them into my house. Again. But to her surprise, one of the snakes decided to crawl the other way towards her once he got out. And that was obviously enough to spook her. She panicked and tried backpedaling but quickly fell on her behind, and that's when the other snake crawled out of the bag still in her hand and decided to have a field trip on her body. It seemed indeed that she was bitten a few times after she freaked out the snakes with her screaming, but I later learned that both of them weren't really that dangerous and that she was fine, and that what paralyzed her that day was probably the fear, not the venom. After I was done watching this, let's just say that it's an understatement if I say that my blood was boiling. I took some time to calm down, and after that I got my son to get a copy of the tape, and I took it to the station right away to file a report against her and, well, press charges of course. I won't bore you with what happened next because it took some time and a lot of legal details that an idiot like myself hardly understands, but after taking this whole thing to court, she was found guilty, and eventually she was sentenced to 10 years in prison among other things. Plus, we're now filing for a lawsuit to get compensated for the emotional damage we had to endure. Her husband ended up selling their house after that to fund the court fees and for potentially paying me for the recent lawsuit we've filed. Plus, it's impossible for them to keep living in this neighborhood after everyone knew what they did to us. And also, from what I've heard, their son's fiancée left him after knowing what his crazy mother did to her neighbors. Overall, that was some really horrible experience I had to go through with my family. But at least there's a bright side to it. I locked up a Karen, gonna get loads of money from her, and I have an interesting story for you guys to listen to. Story 3. So, let me introduce myself first. I'm Lily, a 17-year-old high school student with a passion for photography and a love for my family and friends. I used to have a boyfriend, Kevin, who, unfortunately, turned out to be a nightmare, a brat, entitled, and abusive. Needless to say, I broke up with him, and boy, did that decision lead to an insane chain of events? After the breakup, Kevin decided to run to his mother, Karen Yupp, a real-life Karen, and complain about how I dared to end things with her amazing son. I never really had a good impression of Karen, as she always seemed to meddle in her son's life, treating him like a precious little snowflake. But I never expected what would happen next. One afternoon, I was at home with my sister, just hanging out and trying to forget about the drama with Kevin. Suddenly, we heard loud honking outside, and I was shocked when I looked out the window to see Karen's car parked in front of our house, with Kevin in tow. "Oh no, it's Karen and Kevin," I muttered, concerned and irritated. My little sister, Emma, rushed to the window to see what the commotion was all about. She yelled, "Lily, they're here! What are they doing?" "I have no idea, but I don't think it's going to be good," I replied. We decided not to answer the door, hoping they'd just leave after a while. But Karen was having none of that. She started yelling and screaming from behind the door, demanding to know why I had broken up with her perfect son like that. I could hear Kevin chiming in with his whining too. "You owe Kevin an explanation. Lily, open this door right now," Karen screeched. Emma glanced from the window and shouted back, "We don't owe him anything. He was awful to my sis, and she deserves better." I could feel my cheeks flush with embarrassment, knowing our neighbors could probably hear the whole thing. But Karen and Kevin didn't stop there. Oh no, they took it up a notch. "If you don't open this door, I'll break it down myself," Karen threatened. Emma's eyes widened in fear as she said, "Lily, I think she has a knife." I couldn't believe it. This was escalating way too quickly. I knew we had to act fast. "Okay, that's enough. We're calling the police," I said. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while Emma watched Karen and Kevin closely. But before I could finish the call, we heard loud bangs on the front door. They were trying to knock it down. Emma screamed, "Lily, they're trying to break in." The situation was really intense at this point, and we were completely alone, naively hoping that they would give up and leave soon. But then, out of nowhere, the commotion from the other side of the door stopped. No more banging, no more yelling. Emma and I exchanged a look, wondering if Karen had given up or was plotting another way to get in. We cautiously approached the window to check if Karen had moved away from the front door. To our shock and relief, we saw our veteran father, who had been running an errand when all of this chaos unfolded, back at the house. There he was, standing behind Karen with his shotgun pointed at their heads, demanding that they get down on their knees and warning them not to make a single move if they didn't want their heads to be splattered across the lawn. I couldn't believe my eyes. My dad had arrived just in the nick of time. His stern and enraged expression sent shivers down my spine, but I knew that he would protect us no matter what. From the window above, we watched in awe as Dad continued to keep Karen and Kevin under his control. He looked up and urged us to call 911, and we assured him that we did. A minute after telling him that, we saw the flashing lights of a police car approaching our house. I can't tell you how relieved we felt seeing those lights. The police officers swiftly got out of their car and approached our front yard with caution. Dad maintained his position, never letting his guard down. "Stay right there," he warned Karen and Kevin. The police officers were incredibly professional and handled the situation with expertise. One of the officers said to my dad, "Sir, we have everything under control. Please lower your weapon." My dad, ever cautious, replied, "I want to make sure my family is safe first." "Absolutely, sir. We understand your concern. We're here to help," the officer assured him. Slowly and carefully, my dad lowered the shotgun, never taking his eyes off Karen and Kevin. The officers then approached Karen and Kevin cautiously, making sure they kept their hands visible. One of the officers addressed Karen, "Ma'am, you and your son need to comply with our orders. We received a report of attempted forced entry and threats. Can you tell us your side of the story?" Karen, of course, tried to play the victim, claiming that we were harassing her and that her son did nothing wrong. She even accused my dad of pointing the gun at them for no reason. The other officer, however, had seen enough. He turned to Emma and me, asking us to share our account of what happened. We nervously but confidently explained how Kevin had been abusive and how they both tried to break into our house after we refused to open the door. Thankfully, our neighbor's surveillance cameras captured the entire encounter from across the street. One of the officers noticed the cameras and asked the neighbors if they could review the footage. Sure enough, the footage supported our story entirely, showing Karen and Kevin attempting to force their way in. The officer turned back to Karen and Kevin, saying, "Ma'am, your actions were recorded, and they match the girls' statements. We'll need you both to come with us." Karen was flabbergasted. She and Kevin were arrested, and the officers read them their rights before taking them to the police car. Once they were gone, the officers spoke with my dad again, praising him for protecting his family and handling the situation responsibly. They explained that they were just a call away and encouraged us to report any further issues. We thanked the officers for their prompt response and for handling the situation the way they did. Word of the incident spread throughout our neighborhood, and many neighbors came by to express their support and check on us. It was heartwarming to know we had such caring people around us. In the aftermath, we made sure to reinforce our home's security and installed an alarm system. Dad also gave us some self-defense lessons, just in case we ever found ourselves in a dangerous situation again. The court proceedings for Karen and Kevin began shortly after their arrest. The evidence against them was substantial. Our testimonies, the surveillance footage from the neighbors' cameras, and the discovery of the knife in Karen's purse. The presence of the knife escalated the charges and made the case more serious. During the trial, Karen and Kevin tried to paint themselves as innocent victims, claiming that they were only trying to talk to me after the breakup, and that they never intended to harm me or my sister. However, the evidence and witness accounts were overwhelmingly against them, and their story didn't hold up. When it was time for the verdict, the court found Karen guilty of attempted forced entry, making threats, disorderly conduct, and carrying a concealed weapon. Kevin was found guilty of harassment, abusive behavior, and conspiracy to break and enter. Given the severity of the charges and the dangerous nature of the situation, the judge handed down a significant sentence. Karen was sentenced to serve time in prison for attempted forced entry and carrying a concealed weapon. Kevin received probation and was ordered to attend therapy sessions to address his behavior. Karen and Kevin's actions had caused us immense stress and fear, but knowing that they were held accountable for their behavior provided closure. So, that's the story of how my day turned from chaos to relief, all thanks to my incredible veteran dad. Emma and I will forever be grateful for his bravery and love. Story 4. Several years ago, I worked with a spiteful and troublemaking woman named Mary. She and I applied for the same promotion, which she ultimately received. I was fine with not getting the job because it wasn't part of my planned career path. I was primarily interested in the extra income. Although Mary wasn't in my chain of command, she seemed to believe her promotion gave her the authority to treat me poorly. She made snide comments about me to my coworkers, who thankfully saw through her behavior and stood up for me. She also attempted to assign tasks to me. When I refused, she would complain to our mutual boss until I was forced to take on the additional work. For a while, I suspected she was telling lies about me to our boss, but I had no evidence to confirm it, so I chose to stay silent. Eventually, I was promoted to a position in another department. In the days leading up to my transition, I noticed someone was sabotaging my work data on my files was being altered, among other issues. Naturally, I suspected Mary, but I had no proof. Matters came to a head when she publicly accused me of sabotaging the office computer system. Nobody believed her, but the ordeal was upsetting. Things escalated to the point where I arranged to start my new job earlier than planned. Over the years, Mary and I occasionally had to collaborate on projects. I kept our interactions to a minimum and adopted a cover your actions approach to protect myself. It was awkward but manageable. As time passed, I received several promotions and eventually became the director of my department, which consisted of about 50 employees. My role involved working mainly with supervisors, and I had developed a reputation for successfully handling difficult employees, either by encouraging them to improve or facilitating their exit. However, I was shocked when human resources approached me about taking Mary into my department. She was on the verge of being fired from her current position. My initial reaction was a resounding no. I felt I couldn't remain impartial in managing her, but I was given little choice in the matter. To make matters worse, due to the nature of her work, she had to report directly to me. After reluctantly accepting the situation, I began entertaining thoughts of revenge. The possibilities seemed endless, and I was almost gleeful at the prospect. But the sweetest moment came on her first day. I called her into my office to deliver a serious talk about her role and responsibilities. She entered with a visibly scared expression, looking as though she might be sick. I decided to start gently and asked if she understood how she'd ended up in this situation. Meekly, she replied, "I guess it's karma." Her response took me by surprise. I pressed her to elaborate, and to my astonishment, she apologized for everything she had done to me in the past, including spreading lies and sabotaging my work. I was on the verge of abandoning any thoughts of revenge when I came up with the perfect response. Calmly, I told her, "You know that you could be fired for that." I let the gravity of my words sink in, watching as beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Then I added, But I'm not going to do that. Instead, you are going to decide your fate at this company. Whether you succeed or fail will be entirely up to you, and you won't be able to blame me for what happens." The satisfaction of leaving her fate in her own hands felt far better than wielding my authority over her. Mary is still working in my department, and she has improved significantly. However, I don't think she will stay much longer. Not because she's in danger of being fired, she's genuinely doing well, but because maintaining a positive demeanor around me seems to be a tremendous effort for her. I suspect she'll eventually find another job, hopefully at a different company.